你在看哪儿？
嚯！为何非要好人死，要让恶人活？哈！
我要打10个。摆尾，乔森之斧。 想报仇吗？想报仇吗？想报仇吗？小心！
Christopher Nolan, could we make this spear a little lighter? My arms are getting tired.
I think you should sit this one out, little one. Respectfully, of course. Y'all are a bunch of haters. I'm a man now.
Christopher Nolan, could we make this spear a little lighter? My arms are getting tired.
I think you should sit this one out, little one. Respectfully, of course. Y'all are a bunch of haters. I'm a man now.
Christopher Nolan, could we make this spear a little lighter? My arms are getting tired.
I think you should sit this one out, little one. Respectfully, of course. Y'all are a bunch of haters. I'm a man now.
Christopher Nolan, could we make this spear a little lighter? My arms are getting tired.
I think you should sit this one out, little one. Respectfully, of course. Y'all are a bunch of haters. I'm a man now.
Christopher Nolan, could we make this spear a little lighter? My arms are getting tired.
你相信吗？顶流网红为了掩盖自己的出轨，太夸张了！有个网红竟然开着
Ladies and gentlemen, you speak and we listen. We recently took a survey about our podcast and we asked the question, what topics would you like us to cover? Who would you like us to have on? And I got one request to talk about the Crusades. Yeah, we haven't talked much about the Crusades here on this program, not recently anyway. So we're jumping in right away. I immediately thought of my friend Bill Federer, who has written books on this topic, related to this topic. And it is a topic that I think is largely misunderstood. There are people out there who think that the Crusades are how Christianity actually got started, when that certainly isn't the case. And they don't understand the context of what happened during the Crusades. And they also don't know really what did happen on the Crusades. Much of it was horrific. We'll talk about that as we go. But how did we even get to the point where people were saying, we got to take up arms for Christ? When did this happen? Who ordered it? And what happened? And nobody is better to discuss this than my friend Bill Federer. Here he is again, ladies and gentlemen, the great Bill Federer. Bill, how are you?
Hey, Frank, great to be with you.
We're always great to be with you. We just happened to run into one another last week in Dallas. We were at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. We were both being interviewed by the great Jack Hibbs.
Yes.
And we just had a minute to talk. And once I got this survey and someone said, hey, let's talk about the Crusades a little bit, I said, hey, let's invite Bill on to talk about it. Bill, I think in order to understand the context of the Crusades, and let's just start by saying the Crusades did not begin until 1095 AD. So they had nothing to do with the spread of Christianity in the first 1,000 years. So let's just get that out of the way. But they were a response to Muslim aggression in the Holy Land. So why don't we start with Islam? Because we have to understand the context as to why these Crusades, some people thought were necessary. So talk about Islam a little bit, and then we'll get into the Crusades later in the program.
Oh, right. So if we look at the Middle East, the Jews controlled Judea from King David, 1000 BC on, and then the area was controlled by the Romans, and then the Roman Empire became Christian under Constantine. And so now you have a Christian Roman Empire in the West, and on the East you had Persians. They were Zoroastrian, and there was a 1,000-year war between the Romans and the Persians. They beat each other up and left the power vacuum, and into that power vacuum came Islam. And so Muhammad was born in 570 AD. He's a religious leader in the pagan city of Mecca. He only makes 70 converts in 12 years, gets confrontational. They chase him out of town for disturbing the peace. He goes north as a refugee to a Jewish city called Medina. They let him in as a Muslim immigrant, and he presents his faith, and they reject it. So he goes into the minority neighborhoods, and he begins to organize a following, a community organizer. And when his following gets big enough, he goes to the 3 Jewish tribes that control Medina, and he pressured them into a treaty. Now Muhammad's a political leader. When Muhammad's followers in Mecca get confrontational, they get chased out of town for disturbing the peace. Now there's lots of Muslim refugees, and they come into Medina as lots of Muslim immigrants, and Muhammad allows them to rob the caravans headed back to Mecca in retaliation for them being kicked out. And so Muhammad becomes a military leader. He fights in 66 battles and raids in the next 8 years before he dies, killing around 3,000 people. And so when he dies, you have Caliph Abu Bakr takes over, and then Caliph Uthman and Caliph Ali and Caliph Muawiyah. And an important item is called the stirrup. And it was invented by the Mongolian nomads over by China, little short horses. They'd tie a rope around the horse, leave 2 loops hanging for their big toes. They would ride barefoot, help them keep balance. That invention made its way to China, across the Gobi Desert to Persia, and the Persians made the stirrups out of metal and leather straps. And then another invention called the scimitar sword. So the Byzantine Romans were using heavy metal swords that would take 2 hands, where the scimitar sword was made of Damascus steel. It's where you take the metal and bend it back on top of itself in the hot furnace and hammer it down, and keep bending it, hammer it down, and bending it, hammer it down. It gets thinner and thinner and stronger like a razor blade. And so they could hold the reins of the horse in one hand with their feet in the stirrups, and then with their scimitar sword at a full gallop, they literally could slice someone in half. And so the Muslims got a hold of this invention before the rest of the world did, and so they were able to be victorious on the battlefield. One of the Muslim leaders was nicknamed the Drawn Sword of Allah. He was undefeated in 100 battles. So they attacked the Persians, and then Persia becomes Islamic, and then they attack the Byzantine Empire. So Jerusalem had been a Byzantine city from 325 AD Constantine up until around 648 AD, and that's when it's conquered by Caliph Umar. And then Syria was the first country that was completely Christian. The name Christian started in Syria. The Apostle Paul evangelized Syria until Caliph Umar conquered it around 648 AD. And then they invaded Egypt. Egypt had been completely Christian from the time the Apostle Mark had evangelized it until Amir ibn al-As invaded Egypt in the 640s. And then there used to be 250 Catholic dioceses. Of course, the whole world was still, the Christian world was one at this point, along North Africa. 250 dioceses. They're all conquered by the Umayyad Muslims, partly because the Christians had embraced pietism, their version of separation of church and state. It was this movement that if you really become a Christian, you should give away your money and live in a cave as a hermitage, a monastery, or in Egypt they called them desert fathers, where they would climb on a platform in the desert and bake in the sun, thinking they're denying their flesh and getting holy. But it was this withdrawal that allowed the Umayyad Muslims to conquer all of North Africa. And then in the year 711, 80,000 Muslims invaded Spain. Spain was a bunch of Visigothic Christian kingdoms that didn't get along, and they did the divide and conquer. They would conquer one kingdom and the others wouldn't come to its rescue because they viewed that kingdom as a competitor, and then they would conquer another, and in 10 years they conquered all of Spain. And then they crossed the Pyrenees, and they were finally stopped at the Battle of Tours in 732 AD, just 100 years after the death of Muhammad in 632 AD. And so you had the Christians were begging the Catholic West for help, and from time to time they would talk about coming to their rescue, but never did. So in around 668 AD, Constans II was the Byzantine emperor, and he goes from Constantinople to Rome, and he strips the gold off the Pantheon. And he's getting ready for a crusade to Egypt to try to rescue the Christians in Egypt. But he's in a jacuzzi and a slave breaks a soap dish over his head and kills him. Weird stories in history. Anyway, so the West just couldn't get it together. When the Muslims conquered North Africa so fast, it held back the ships of papyrus, which was paper, and so there's a paper shortage in Europe. And they write fewer books. We call this the beginning of the Dark Ages. And then you have the Turks. The Turks convert to Islam, and beginning in 1071, they begin to invade Turkey. And all 7 churches mentioned in the book of Revelation were wiped out by the Muslim Turks. First the Seljuk Turks, and then the Ottoman Turks. And so as they're invading into Turkey, they get closer and closer to Constantinople. And so the Byzantine Christian Roman Empire West begins to beg the Catholics in the western part of Europe for help. In the year 1054 AD is when the Greek Orthodox and the Roman Catholics split. It was like called the Great Schism. It's the divorce of all divorces, right? It was over 2 words in the Nicene Creed. The Greeks said the Holy Spirit proceeded from the Father, and the Catholic West said the Holy Spirit proceeded from